The market at Callow Crossing ran along a single unpaved street, and on the morning Mara arrived it was loud with the clatter of iron pots and the smell of smoked meat. She walked with her hood up, her green hands tucked inside her sleeves, the way she had learned to walk in every human town since leaving the eastern valleys. Eyes forward, pace steady, stop for nothing. The stall keepers would sell to her, they always did. Once she put coin on the wood, but they would not look at her, and the other shoppers would step back when she drew near, clearing a small, silent corridor around her wherever she moved. She had grown used to the corridor. It had been 3 years now. She was looking for salt and a new whetstone, nothing more. She found the salt at the second stall, dropped 2 copper coins on the counter without a word, tucked the paper package inside her pack, and turned toward the far end of the street where she had spotted a tool merchant's awning. That was when he called her name. Mara Thornville. She stopped as if the ground had risen up under her boot. It was not the name that stopped her, it was the way it was spoken. Not as a question, not as an accusation. 3 syllables, low and unhurried, the way her mother used to say it when supper was ready, like the name itself was a welcome, like whoever held it was glad it existed in the world. She turned slowly. He was sitting on the stone steps of the old granary building, not 10 feet away. An old man, or nearly one, perhaps 65, perhaps older, with a face that had been out in all weathers for a very long time. His coat was patched at both elbows and the hem was frayed to threads. His boots were wrapped at the toe with a strip of leather that had been there long enough to darken with age. He had a stick across his knees and a pack beside him that was more patched than canvas, and in his lap sat a tin cup of something warm, both hands wrapped around it as if he had been cold for a long time and was only now beginning to mend. The people nearest to them had gone quiet. 2 women at the salt stall were watching. A boy with a barrow had stopped moving. Mara looked at the old man. "Who are you?" she said. He smiled, not a sharp smile, not the guarded kind she was used to from strangers, but a slow, tired, genuinely warm smile, the kind that belonged on a face that had once been very fond of laughing. "Rowan Vess," he said, "I knew your mother." She did not believe him at first. That was the sensible thing, not to believe a ragged old man on granary steps who claimed to know your mother in a town where you had arrived 2 hours ago and spoken to no one. She told him so plainly, standing in the market street with the corridor of empty space around her, and the 2 women at the salt stall still watching. He nodded as if that was exactly the right response. "There's a fire out behind the inn," he said. "They let me keep it going in exchange for splitting wood. If you want to stand in the street and decide whether to trust me, that's fine. If you'd rather sit down somewhere less observed, the fire's better." She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back without flinching, without any of the bright-eyed wariness that most human men showed when they met her eyes directly. He just looked tired and patient, and a little hopeful, the way a man looks when he has been carrying something a long way and is not sure he will make it all the way to the door. She picked up her pack and followed him. The fire behind the inn was a good one, well-built, dry wood, the kind of fire that knew what it was doing. There was a log on each side of it and a pot of water hanging over the flames on an iron hook, and the yard behind the inn was private enough that the sound of the market was only a murmur. Rowan lowered himself onto one of the logs with the careful deliberateness of a man whose knees had opinions, and Mara sat across from him with her pack on her lap, not quite relaxing. He told her his story without being asked, which she respected. He had been a frontier scout in his younger years. He said, one of the men hired to map the eastern passes before the trade roads were laid down. That was how he had come to travel with her mother's clan for 2 seasons, 31 years ago. Her mother's name was Davin Thornville, a clan guide of the Ashrun Valley Orcs, and she had kept Rowan's party from walking into a box canyon in a winter storm, and had taught him which roots were safe to eat on the high ridges. And in return he had shared what he had: food, fire, honest company, and the respect of treating her as the expert she was. They had traveled together for 8 weeks in the first season and 6 in the second, and then the contract ended and the roads pulled them in different directions, and he had not seen her since. "She spoke of you," he said. "You weren't born yet in the first season. In the second she was carrying you. She said if it was a daughter she would name her Mara after her grandmother." Mara said nothing for a moment. "My mother died 9 years ago," she said. "I know, I heard 4 years back from a trader out of the eastern valleys." He looked into the fire. "I'm sorry. She was one of the finest people I ever traveled with." The flames cracked and shifted. Somewhere above the inn's rooftop, a crow called once and went quiet. "How did you know I was here?" Mara said. "I didn't for cert. I've been making my way west. I have a sister in Dunmore, or had one. I don't know if she's still living. I heard in the last town that an orc woman had passed through heading for Callow Crossing alone, and I thought the coloring might match what Davin described. Green with copper in it, she always said, like a new leaf in autumn sun." He looked at her then, across the fire. "She described you before you were even born, said she already knew what color you'd be." Mara's hands had gone still on her pack. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had not cried in front of anyone since the valley. But something in her chest had shifted, the way a stone shifts when the water has been working at it long enough, and she had to look away for a moment at the fire's edge until it settled. "What do you want?" she said. Her voice was steady. "Nothing," he said simply. "I wanted to find you and tell you that your mother was remembered well, that someone carried her name with respect all this way." He looked back at the fire. "That's all I had to give. I know it isn't much." It was more than he knew. Mara sat with that for a while, not speaking, and Rowan let her sit without filling the silence with anything. He was good at silence. She could tell that about him within the first few minutes. He had the patience of a man who had spent years outdoors, where silence is not absence but presence, and he did not seem uncomfortable with hers. After a time she asked him about the sister in Dunmore, and he told her quietly that he was not sure anymore. The last letter had been 2 winters ago, and the road west had taken longer than he had planned, and he had been ill in the autumn, and his boots had given out twice. He said it without complaint, the way people state facts about weather. But she could hear underneath it the particular tiredness of a man who was not sure what he would find at the end of the road, or whether there was anything left to find. "When did you last eat?" she said. He thought about it. "Yesterday morning. The inn will give me supper for the wood." She stood up and went inside. The innkeeper was a broad woman with a practical face who watched Mara cross to the bar without stepping back, which Mara noted. She put 3 coins on the bar and said she needed a room for the night for the old man by the fire, and whatever supper he could be given now rather than later. The innkeeper looked at the coins. "That's Rowan," she said. "He's been here 4 days, doesn't beg, splits a fair cord of wood." "I know," Mara said. The woman looked at her for a moment, not with hostility, with the frank, measuring look of someone deciding something. "You know him." "He knew my mother," Mara said. Something in the innkeeper's face settled. "Room 3, she said. "I'll send out bread now." Rowan protested the room. Not with embarrassment, but with genuine concern. He asked her twice whether she could spare it, and she told him twice that she could. And on the third he stopped and looked at her with that tired, warm expression and said, "Your mother would have done the same thing." "I know," Mara said. "She taught me." They ate supper by the fire. The innkeeper sent out a board with bread, salt butter, roasted turnips, and a heel of hard cheese, which was better than either of them had expected. Rowan ate carefully, the way a man eats when he is very hungry but does not wish to show it, and Mara pretended not to notice. She told him about the eastern valleys and the clan's move north, and the work she had been finding as a hired guide on the trade road since she had come west. He told her about the passes he had mapped, most of them now proper roads, and the ones that were still only known to scouts and to the orc clans who had kept them for generations. Your mother's roots, he said. Half the eastern trade roads follow lines she walked first. Mara looked at the fire. She would have said that was just getting from one place to another. Most great things are, he said. The yard had gone dark around them, and the first stars were showing above the inn's roofline, and the fire had burned down to a good steady glow. Rowan's posture had eased. The tightness around his shoulders that she had noticed in the market was gone, replaced by something more like rest. He looked, she thought, like a man who had set something down that he had carried a very long way. She walked him to room 3 and made sure he had the extra blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed, and he thanked her with a quiet dignity that made the thanks mean something. And she pulled the door to, and stood in the corridor for a moment with her hand still on the latch. Then she went downstairs and asked the innkeeper for a chair. She sat outside room 3 until the lamp inside went out, and the sound of breathing through the door became the slow, even breathing of real sleep. She told herself she was being cautious. Old men who slept in the cold for weeks sometimes took poorly when they came inside. She had seen it. She told herself it was practical sense. But the truth, if she was honest with herself in the dark corridor with the inn settling quiet around her, was that she had not wanted to leave. For the first time in 3 years, she was in the company of someone who had known the person she came from, who carried her name in his memory the way her mother had first spoken it, with gladness, without condition, and the simple fact of that had done something to the loneliness that had been sitting in her chest so long she had stopped noticing it was there. She dozed in the chair. She was not uncomfortable. In the morning, the innkeeper found her in the corridor before Rowan's door and set a cup of tea beside her on the floor without a word, then went back downstairs. Mara heard Rowan moving in the room, heard the careful sounds of a man being quiet so as not to disturb her, and almost smiled. She knocked. "I know you're awake," she said. A pause. "I was trying to be considerate." "Come and have breakfast." Downstairs, over porridge and a second round of tea, she told him about the road west, the grades, the reliable water, the inns worth stopping at. He listened with the focused attention of a man who had been navigating for 40 years and could still learn a new route, and she found herself drawing the shape of it in spilled tea on the table, the way she had seen her mother sketch maps on any surface that was handy. When the innkeeper came to clear the table, she set down 2 keys instead of 1 and looked at Mara. "Room 4, she said, "is empty. It's smaller than 3, but it's dry and the window faces east." She paused. "You said you do guiding work. I have people asking every week for someone who knows the eastern passes." Mara looked at the key. "I wasn't planning to stay," she said. "I know," said the innkeeper. "The key doesn't expire." She left it on the table and walked back to the kitchen. Rowan wrapped his hands around his tea and did not say anything, which was the right thing to do. Mara looked at the key for a long moment. Small iron, plain loop, nothing remarkable about it. But it was a key to a dry room with an east-facing window in a town where someone had learned her name and said it without flinching. And on the road west there was a sister who might or might not be living, and behind them was a corridor where she had slept in a chair and not felt alone. She picked up the key. She held it in her palm, green fingers closing over the plain iron, and the weight of it was so small it was almost nothing. It was the lightest thing she had carried in 3 years.